back. Our second point of focus tonight, as we bring to you all the updates of coronavirus, is the plight of thousands of people in our country. Thousands of casual workers, daily wage laborers, construction workers, those who've been rendered jobless ever since the lockdown began. Those who don't have money and in many cases no place to stay, no food, no water, and have now set out to go back to their villages. No transport. How do they get back to their villages? Well, thousands of them living in big cities from Delhi and Mumbai and other cities have decided to just start walking. And no matter how long it takes and how many days it takes, they just want to get back to their family with have nothing else to do in the big cities. But think about their plight, viewers. Not only is it a health risk for them and everybody else as they move in such large numbers, there is no public transport available. Some of them are planning to not just walk down to their villages in the neighboring state of Uttar Pradesh, but to go all the way to Jharkhand. Many have already reached Rajasthan. Along the highways, there is nothing. Everything is in a state of lockdown. There are no dhabas, nothing to eat, nothing to drink. Some of them are managing to hitch a ride on top of a truck, of an essential supply truck that may take them to a certain distance. But to what distance? How do we solve this problem? Why is it so essential that the governments right now move on this and not just waste times in issuing advisories to each other to say, look at this problem, this must be resolved too. This must be resolved on priority. I want to bring you a couple of examples before we get into the conversation. Radheshyam, a labor supplier in the national capital, is actually attempting to cycle close to 400 kilometers to his hometown, which is Farrukhabad in Uttar Pradesh. Not alone, but with his wife and 3 children. For the last 2 days, he tells us they've barely had anything to eat except some basic dal rice that they got today finally, which is why they've been forced to take this decision. They also don't know when they'll get their next meal. Take a look.
आप लोग कहाँ रहते थे दिल्ली में?
द्वारिका सेक्टर 28।
वहाँ काम करते थे?
हाँ, बेलदारी करते थे।
बेलदारी का। और आप लोग कहाँ जा रहे हैं?
फर्रुखाबाद गांव जा रहे हैं।
गांव जा रहे हैं। काम आप लोगों का सब बंद हो गया?
हाँ, काम बंद हो गया है।
तो ये 5 लोग आप लोग पैदल रिक्शे से?
साइकिल क्या करें, मजबूरी है।
साइकिल से। तो आप लोगों के पास कुछ पैसा वैसा कुछ?
पैसा ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, खाली है। साइकिल
फर्रुखाबाद तो बहुत दूर है यहाँ से, करीब 200।
क्या किया जाए सर, यहाँ तो भूखे मर जाते, इससे बढ़िया भाग लो। 1-2 दिन लगेंगे, जो भी लगेंगे, तो वहाँ घर पे खाने को तो मिलेगा।
तो मतलब आप लोगों को कोई मदद दिल्ली सरकार कहीं से कुछ?
अब दिल्ली सरकार मदद देती, पता कब देती, जब तक मिलती तब तक पता। घर पे खाने को नहीं है, कल से नहीं खाने को था तो
खाने के लिए
मदद
कल से नहीं है, जब 2-4 दिन का था वो खत्म हो गया। कल से भूखे हैं, तब जा रहे गाँव को।
ये रास्ते में खाना मिला है तो रखे हैं, आगे खाएंगे जाके।
Not just their story, hundreds of them like this. Imagine a family, the wife and children all on one cycle with whatever little luggage they have, out to make a journey of 400 kilometers. Here's another example. This is a family of migrant workers, again from Delhi, who have been working back, and they're on their way to Aligarh for the past 3 days now. Hungry, thirsty, homeless, with tired, blistered feet. Take a look.
We are right now at Pari Chowk, and as you can see behind me, lot of these migrant laborers, people who want to go back to their village because they don't have anything over here, are walking and they are going because there is no transport available, as we all know. आप लोग कहाँ जाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं?
अलीगढ़।
हाँ, अलीगढ़। तो कितने देर से चल रहे हैं आप लोग अभी?
करीब 8 बजे से।
करीब 8 बजे से। कितना चल रहे होंगे आप लोग? हाँ?
2-2.5 घंटे चल रही है।
तो अभी आप लोगों को ट्रांसपोर्ट वांसपोर्ट तो मिलने वाला नहीं है, खाने का क्या अरेंजमेंट?
कुछ नहीं, साथ में लेके आए हैं अपने खाने के लिए थोड़ा बहुत।
तो अगर ट्रांसपोर्ट नहीं मिला तो कब तक चलेंगे?
जब तक मंजिल नहीं पाएंगे तब तक चलते ही रहेंगे, कल तक तो पहुंच ही जाएंगे।
आप लोगों के साथ बच्चे भी है और आप लोगों के पास मास्क भी नहीं, आप लोगों को डर नहीं लग रहा है?
जब मौसम
बताइए, आप लोगों को डर नहीं लग रहा? बच्चे भी आप लोगों के साथ मास्क नहीं।
डर तो नहीं है, एक दूसरे से अलग रहने का वो है, अलग जाना पड़ेगा, थोड़ा दिक्कत।
आप लोग यहाँ क्या करते हो? आप लोग बेसिकली यहाँ
हम तो एक्सपोर्ट लैंड में
Chalo, as you can see, these people are walking and going. They have kids with them. They don't have anything to eat. They're carrying their stuff to eat also is what they're saying. And they will continue to walk till they reach their destination. They all want to go back because they've lost their jobs. There is nothing to do with the lockdown that is here. They have no facilities. You can see they have kids along with them with no mask. With all this, they're also risking their lives, but they don't have an option to. They need to go back home, and that is where they think they will be safe.
Through the day, our reporters from many cities have been bringing us such reports, each more heartbreaking than the other. No home, no money, no food or water available en route, and no solution in sight. All they know is they just got to keep walking. There are many aspects to this problem, viewers. Their health, the health of those around them, their basic human rights, the fact that they need food and shelter. And it seems that we completely forgot about this aspect when we were planning this lockdown. What do the governments do now? That's the big question. Let's say good evening to Mr. Yogendra Yadav, National President of Swaraj India, of course a political analyst, Professor Ravi Srivastava, Director for Center for Employment Studies at the Institute for Human Development, joins us this evening. I've also got Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, former IPS officer and former Central Information Commissioner, and he was with us last evening as well, telling us about, the stories about workers walking all the way from Delhi, attempting to reach their village in Jharkhand. Gopal Krishna Agarwal of BJP will also be joining us shortly, and I have Mr. Anjan Roy, Senior Economist, Ex-Advisor of Economic Affairs at FICCI, who's with us. Good evening to all of you. Mr. Yadav, if I can begin with you. It seems that when this lockdown was planned, we completely forgot about a significant percentage of the population that will be rendered jobless and homeless. And now we are scrambling to figure out how to give them the basics.
That's right. As you say, these are heartbreaking images. I've been watching these images, videos for the last 2 days. And as an Indian, I just feel so ashamed of myself. This is not just a natural disaster. Yes, there is a global emergency. Yes, things are not things that everyone had anticipated. Yes, the health crisis is not that of the making of the government. But these people walking on national highways alone, a 90-year-old person walking, people walking with their kids to 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, cycling. This is a policy-induced disaster. This is not merely a natural disaster. The policy-induced disaster is at both planes. One, as you say, did the government not realize that everyone needed a little notice? There was a 4-day gap between the first call given by the Prime Minister and the second. Could he have not said in the very first call, all right, I'm giving you 4 days, reach wherever you want to. After that, we may have to close everything. Why this rush about announcing things at 8 p.m. and then saying everything closes at 12? Is this a sensible policy? Why is it that passenger trains were cancelled first, Rajdhani is cancelled later, and air flights are the last ones to be cancelled, while the percolation of the disease is exactly the other way around? So is it that these people simply don't figure in our priority? Why is it that even after 2 days of reportage of this, all we have are some half-hearted measures to say, all right, we'll provide them water, all right, we'll provide them something. Why can't the government of India think of some transport? Clearly, these many people walking with each other is as dangerous for the disease as they're sitting in a bus together. Why not think of any transport? These are areas where where National Highway Patrolling Authority, so patrolling is taking place, police vehicles are already moving. Why can't we make some arrangement? And why can't we make arrangements within the metros, assuring that for the next 20 days, don't worry, there's food for you? So to my mind, this is a complete disaster of a policy. And here is a country which said we were going to be 5 trillion economy, a country that has claims of going to space. I mean, this really makes me feel so ashamed of what's happening in our country. And mind you, I say this as someone who is in favor of deadlock. I'm not against this policy. I've repeatedly said we should come to the central government's help. The public authorities help to enforce this deadlock. But if this is how we are going to treat these situations, then deadlock itself may be threatened.
Yeah, Mr. Yadav, you're right. While we do talk about being a 5 trillion economy, we often forget what is at the heart of building that economy. People who are actually help us build that economy are the ones who completely get forgotten, often when it comes to disasters or even otherwise policy making. I want to read out to our viewers the advisory. This is an advisory that has been released by the Home Ministry today. And the Home Ministry and the Home Secretary has actually written to all states and union territories to take immediate steps to provide adequate support, including food and shelter, to migrant agricultural laborers, industrial workers, unorganized sector workers during this 21-day nationwide lockdown. And it goes on and on to say what all needs to be done now. 2 days later, 2 days after the lockdown was announced, on the third day,
Can I say one thing about this advisory?
Is when this gets announced. Yes, Mr. Yadav.
This advisory, the second or third paragraph, virtually says that the job should be handed over to NGOs.
Yes.
So here is a central government which says either the state, it's a problem to be handled by state governments or a problem to be handled by NGOs. Now, this clearly cannot happen. If the central government can invoke the National Disaster Act, which it should invoke, they have invoked it, then they cannot shirk the responsibility. If the Prime Minister can announce a nationwide deadlock, then surely he has some responsibility about handling the crisis that would come out of this deadlock, about planning this. The government cannot shirk its responsibility, and I'm afraid this particular notification looks like simple shirking of responsibility.
Okay, I do agree with you to a certain extent, but when the challenge is so big, then what can possibly be the overarching solution? Professor Srivastava, India is a completely different, country altogether in terms of the challenge that we have with a huge population. It's our biggest concern when it comes to fighting COVID. It's also our biggest concern when we take any of such measures, because in a shelter home, if 2,000 people have to be fed food, well, the space is limited. Now, what do you do? Where do you keep them? Where do you, can you really ensure that they all stay within the same metro where they've been working? If not, do we transport them to their home villages? What should be done in such a scenario?
So, Tanvi, the WHO has been emphasizing right from the beginning that each country's context is different, and the policies that we use to control COVID will have to be different from country to country. As you have pointed out, we are a poor country. And when it comes to migrants, let me just put some facts before you. We have the largest number of seasonal and circular migrants outside of China. We have the largest number of vulnerable migrants anywhere in the world. Currently, the kind of figures that we are talking about are probably closer. People who are stranded, would like to get back to the respective states, are probably somewhere in the 60 to 80 lakh range. And if we also look at stranded students who are left without hostels, we are talking about 1 crore people. Now, if this is what is happening today because of unpreparedness, lack of foresight, is a public health and a humanitarian disaster. Because these people are crowding into shelter homes, on the roads, they're unprepared, and the country is unprepared to provide them with adequate facilities which can meet the public health challenge and which can meet the humanitarian challenge. I think we have to understand that a lot more needs to be done. And I think Yogendra hit the nail on the head when he said that it is the responsibility of the central government and the National Disaster Management Agency today to provide a clear lead and coordinate the effort either to provide shelter and assistance to migrants which are safe in the urban areas, or to help them get back to their home states safely in an environment where they can continue to be safe.
Yes.
And I think this is the huge challenge before us today. Here and now, the NDMA and the central government should see this challenge. Otherwise, everything that it wants to get done will get undone.
But I just also want to let our viewers know the visuals that are playing on the screens right now is what is being is the live feed that we're getting right now from the Noida highway. This is Noida, and across this highway, people are just sitting and walking down. Shots just coming in of these people walking down. Look at this status right now. Amazing. What's going to happen? Once they get onto the highway outside of city limits, where are they going to get any food? Where are they going to sit?
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely.
Raining in Delhi. So now if it begins to rain in outskirts and other parts, they will also be on the road, drenched, hungry, thirsty and tired. Before these shots, we had, visuals of people just sitting there. They had parked themselves on the roads with nowhere else to go. Here, look at those shots. Now, this is going to be a big challenge, and this is happening in the national capital. Mr. Yogendra Yadav, Delhi government set up a few places where they were giving food, but right now it looks like we've just not been able to sense the gravity of the situation and the extent of it. How many people, surely we have a database of how many casual workers or migrant workers and daily wage laborers are there in the national capital.
Tanvi, if anyone asked me, show me a picture of policy disaster, I would show the television screen right now. This is what a policy disaster looks like. Delhi government has taken lots of steps. I would not put principal responsibility on Delhi government because they have done a lot. And today they say they are making arrangements for 2 lakh meals. Today they say lunch was distributed in 2 lakh meals. They are using all the schools for that. So these are the kind of steps Delhi government should take. In all fairness, Delhi government did not know that the Prime Minister was going to announce this and give only 4 hours of lead time for that. As Professor Srivastav says, and he knows much more than any of us does about migration, about labor, their conditions. In that situation, the principal responsibility rests with National Disaster Management Authority. And please remember, the chairperson of National Disaster Management Authority is the Prime Minister of India. They knew that they are giving only 4 hours. There was some rationale they would have known. It was their responsibility to think about these things, plan something. Even today, something can be done. Please provide them some vehicles, because clearly, whatever infection they would have had, they've already had it. They're sitting in a crowd. So clearly, no social distancing here, and they would not get more infected now by sitting in a bus. Can we make some arrangement, something for food? So these are absolutely urgent things that need to be done right away without any delay. This is a national disaster. I mean, today I looked at, and it so happens, Tanvi, that we can get images from Noida, that we can get images from national capital.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this is happening all over the country.
Yeah.
And this is such a severe indictment of us as a nation, our government, and our entire system.
Yes, no, you're right. Absolutely, Mr. Yogendra Yadav. And I just want to once again emphasize on this and appeal to all the governments, central government and the state governments, please look at this. If this hasn't struck you for whatever reasons, then look at it now and realize just what an emergency this is. We're in the middle of a lockdown. We're in the middle of fighting a pandemic. and we completely forgot about this possible issue. How is that possible? What is our solution apart from issuing an advisory? The governments need to treat it urgently right now. Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, if I could come to you. Do you agree with what Yogendra Yadav is saying? Perhaps it's time to bring in the NDRF, treat it like a disaster where you have hundreds and thousands sometimes who are rendered homeless, without food, without shelter, and come up with a solution for these people.
At times like this, all these authorities do not work. In a global emergency of this kind, it is the cabinet secretary who has to take the lead. He is the head of the National Crisis Management Committee also. My problem with the faceless government is that after the announcement of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, there is no one who is actually giving announcement about the nuts and bolts as to how the entire exercise will be carried out. I totally agree with Mr. Yadav when he says that, people should have been fed. This is not a very difficult task. If you are in the Delhi government or with the central government, you should know exactly that in a population of 1.7 crores, how many people would be coming for food or needing food. You are giving by the Delhi government estimates, they have said that they'll be giving free food to 4 lakhs people a day. That's not enough at all. And it's not enough to give them in the shelters. At a time like this, the areas could have been marked out. There is so much you can do at the district level. If I were to be asked as a superintendent of police of a particular district, I'll actually carve out areas where exactly those food centers or shelters should be. And in fact, today is not the time to think about deficit financing or anything like that. You have to just throw in money. I totally agree. You should all ramp up your capacities for transport, put them onto the roads, ask all the state governments to, wherever possible, Good Samaritans, the district collectors, the superintendents of police to reach these highways. Whatever facilities can be given to them should be given. This is actually the time not to send these nameless, faceless advisories from the Home Ministry. There should be a cabinet secretary or a home secretary or somebody designated who comes every day and faces the TV channels, faces the people and the media and tells them these are difficulties. Yes, we are trying to do this, and this is where we are falling short, but we are still trying our best. This is the kind of thing which should go to the state governments, and every day the deliberations between the center and the state government should also be announced to the public to shore up their confidence. In fact, today is the time already when at least 10 centers should be opened up. These stadiums should be utilized, because after the incubation period, when you actually know the number of people infected, you'll need lots and lots of spaces and spaces in between for taking care of these people. So the migrants issue, I won't say that, it is a policy failure. Yes, in many of these, when you decide instead like this, it is difficult to think of everything. And I would say they even knew this. But the kind of humongous population we are dealing with, it will remain a problem. But yes, whatever can be done right now should be done immediately.
Yes, Mr. Ranjan Roy, how do we deal with this? Individual states on their own? Do we bring in the private sector? These are the people who keep the economic machinery going on a daily basis. Now that we are in a shutdown, we can't just forget them.
Yeah, this is a tragedy. This is a tragedy of worst kind. And naturally, people would become very emotionally surcharged. But what is very important is to think very clearly, what are the options available now to mitigate this disaster? First of all, the best option would have been what we have already lost. That is, keeping these people where they were and giving them assurance and food and money to carry on where they were. Already, Finance Minister announced that 1.7 lakh crore aid to the needy. Now, this is the money which should have flowed to all these migrant laborers. But the point is, what is the last mile connectivity, delivery chain of the money to these people. Had that been thought out, it would not have been so stupendous tragedy. Secondly, now that people have flowed out from these metropolises, what you can do, what can we do about it? For example, if there was a war now the soldiers will move in large numbers. So they are given shelters, tents to live. They are fed. So many other logistics are looked after. So why not swing into action, give them what has already been stated by someone, that give them earmarked areas where the military tents could be erected very fast. Some foods could be organized so that those who are already on the road are looked after. Those who have not left the metropolises, they can be told to stay put. Money could be reached to them, and the crisis could be averted to that extent. Well, these are things which should be taken up immediately on an absolutely emergency basis, as if we are in a war. Actually, we are in a war in which we have to provide for our people, and this is what needs to be done immediately.
You know, unfortunately, what's also happening is that not only have we forgotten to plan for this, we're also, on-ground authorities also don't know how to deal with it. So, migrant workers who were heading home were caught by cops in Badaयूं in Uttar Pradesh, and then they were forced to hop around like frogs. Now, after that video emerged and went viral, the senior superintendent of police in Badaयूं apologized in a video that came out a day later. Now, I'm not going to say that, the police went overboard, but the police also needs to be sensitive of who these people are, where they're coming from, why they have been forced to come out on streets. There was another example where actually the Maharashtra police found about 300 migrant workers crammed up inside 2 container trucks. Imagine that. 300 of them crammed up inside container trucks, which are supposed to be carrying essential commodities, trying to get out of Telangana and get back to their villages. They were escaping Telangana and trying to get back home when they were caught by these authorities. And obviously, everybody in a state of shock at that point of time. Professor Srivastav, what would you suggest the states do now? Keep them wherever they are, even if they're on the highway halfway through, provide them shelter at that place, ask them to stay put, or provide them transport to reach home. What should be done?
Tanvi, as I said earlier, this is something which the National Disaster Management Authority has to coordinate. First of all, people have to be kept safe where they are, provided they want to stay there. And this is not only in schools and in shelters. In places like Delhi and Hyderabad, there are thousands of rooms available in guest houses, in government facilities, in private hotels, which should now be requisitioned as shelter places, as appropriate shelter places, because they have proper sanitation facilities, and these should be used for housing migrants. These should be used for isolation centers, not just schools which are very ill-equipped, shelter homes which are very ill-equipped and will cause further public health disasters. Secondly, I think there will have to be a plan to move people back to their areas of origin, because over a period of time, but there should be an orderly plan. There should be a safe plan to be able to do it, but it has to be implemented as soon as possible. You talked about the NDRF. The NDRF support should be enlisted, but also frontline organizations which have been working with migrant workers, working with informal workers, their support should be enlisted. The basic contradiction here is that the Prime Minister said nobody should cross their Dahlij. There is a Lakshman Rekha. There are crores of people in this country for whom there is no Dahlij. There is no Dahlij to cross.
Yes.
And the civil society organizations also cannot cross these Dahlij till their support is enlisted by the government. Therefore, we need to have a proper plan in place. There are a large number of us who have worked with migrant workers for decades, And the support of all such organizations, grassroots organizations, should be enlisted. There should be a district helpline. There should be a portal on which the workers, their problems can be tracked, and a plan evolved in real time. Because as I told you in the beginning, this is a public health disaster. This is a humanitarian disaster of the worst kind.
Yes, and the other aspect
that we're trying to do.
And the other aspect that I wanted to highlight, and Mr. Roy, perhaps you can come in on this. Just yesterday, the finance minister came out and announced this 1.7 lakh crore package, which is largely for the poor people to help them out in these tough times. But what's the point of saying that we will transfer some money in their account and ensure that they have free gas? These people don't even have a home. They're stranded on the road. Where are they going to use that gas to cook what? What's the point of giving them ration? They can't eat the raw wheat or rice that we provide them. Is there a disconnect between what is being planned and what's happening on ground?
Yeah, as I was telling you, I mean, this last mile connectivity between what is the policy and its implementation, this is very important. Now, admittedly, all the details could not be foreseen. For developed countries, a sudden lockdown is a possibility, which does not entail this kind of movement of huge number of people. For China, it was, but China is a different sort of country. We cannot afford to do what China did. So we have to be doing things in our own way. I think the best alternative was to retain them in where they were, because, for example, their bank accounts, Jan Dhan bank accounts, are possibly in the place where they were working, and their money will be transferred to Jan Dhan account. Now, how can they access that account if they leave that place and go off to their villages? This is a problem. Now, once again, if you give them money and all of them go to the bank to withdraw cash, it will be a tremendous problem. Along with the money, you have to ensure that they can draw the money or some kind of card which can be used at PDS outlets, because we have PDS outlets which can supply them. But all this is conditional on the fact that they are in the place where they were working, or they have their Jan Dhan accounts, that kind of thing. So best alternative would have been to retain them. Now, I suppose all of them have not come out of Delhi or the metropolises where they were working, and some are still there. They should be retained. The state governments, district authorities, as has been already said, district authorities and state governments of these places have a role to play. You cannot implement this bypassing them. You have to go through them. Central government doesn't have the ability to reach all of these people. So state governments must be told, not just an advisory, it's a compulsory mandating that they have to look after these migratory workers who are still in the states, keep them there, and then look after them until the situation or lockdown is withdrawn. And those who are on the road, yes, they should be provided either accommodation and shelter on the along the highways, or they should be provided transport for going to their villages. Now, this is not a very big problem. The army has to be involved at this stage. They have fleet of cars, they have fleet of trucks. And because, see, if 300 people are traveling in a container, I mean, the chances are so many people will die in the process of transportation, because in this hot weather, inside a container, it will be unbearable. So to avoid that kind of tragedy, right, the army should be brought in immediately as for relief work. But
you know, Mr. Roy,
harm in doing that.
Yes, I agree with you, but all the states have to come on board with this. I'll give you an example. 26,000 migrants were reportedly at the Gujarat-Rajasthan border. There were these men and women and children who all gathered and crowded together to the point that there were thousands and, about 26,000 of them at Ratanpur, which is on the Gujarat-Rajasthan border. This build-up took place in the last 2-3 days, and then the government said, well, while the Gujarat government said we are telling them not to travel, we will give them food and shelter, but they're going on any which ways. The Rajasthan government said, oh, we will first screen them one by one and then let them in. I mean, imagine the disaster that's unfolding at that border area between the two states. So the states also need to get together and have a consolidated plan of how they're going to deal with this, and not just on an individual basis, especially for those who've already moved. For those who are within Delhi, yes, perhaps, or within, Tamil Nadu and Chennai specifically, or on the outskirts where you do have a lot of migrant population from north and northeast, they can stop it. But what about those who've already started and gotten out on the highways? That becomes a big challenge. Mr. Azad, you had a point. Go ahead, please.
In fact, another development is taking place in Jharkhand, where some of the migrants have already reached somehow by containers or essential services, goods trucks, etc. They are not allowed to enter the villages, and they are camping outside till the incubation period is over. So this is a huge tragedy in the making. But right now I've heard very respectfully my co-panelists. Theories about involving, NGOs and it's all right, but at a time like this, you don't get help from anywhere. Two things are very, very important right now. I totally agree with Mr. Roy when he says that the army needs to be called in. In fact, the army chief made a statement the other day that he was ready to fight the COVID. And I was very happy to hear that. In fact, the army canteens are the most well organized. And I would say that the Delhi government will not be capable of supplying more than, say, 4 lakhs a day as they have promised. So one of the most important reasons which will hold these people back is because they don't have money, is that they will get food and the availability is there. And therefore, this is where we need to do first. The first action on ground is how much food in these metros where the reverse migration is taking place from the cities to the village, there, how much food can be given to the vulnerable class of people. And secondly, as far as transport goes, you're absolutely right that we have to get the states on board. In fact, some of your reporters who are going on ground were giving the numbers of the helplines of the state resident commissioners here, which the people going to Bihar or UP did not know at all. So this is something which needs to be circulated. Two things. One, food, and second, transport. And the third thing is that the appeal to the employers for giving money to the people who are not working and who are daily wages, etc., has perhaps not worked because most of them are not getting money. The small employers are also saying that because they are not manufacturing, they don't have the money at all. So that's another serious issue which needs to be looked at, and the government needs to assure them or find a solution to it.
Yes, absolutely, because some of these businesses have also been, completely...
If I can point out,
completely shut down, and they're not making any money to even help out their own workers. I have a viewer who's on the phone line and he's been patiently waiting by, but Mr. Roy wanted to add to this. Let me just get in a word from Anjan Roy, and then we'll go to Mr. Subramanian.
The moment you can say that your money is transferred to your Jan Dhan account in the place where you are working, where you have your bank account, there will be a ready incentive for these people not to budge. You make that money available in the Jan Dhan account and announce it to these people. So that is one incentive which can pin them down to where they were. And the government has earmarked so much money, it should now start flowing.
Okay, yes, perhaps a point that the government should look at, and maybe should have looked at a couple of days ago, but we have to do what we can now in this current situation. Mr. Subramanian, thank you so much for patiently waiting. What would you like to say?
Yeah, see, I would like to say this program, as the policy of the government has not been very meticulously planned. Anyway, the past is the past. Now we have got a weekend coming Saturday, Sunday, so I think the government should immediately organize the transport to see these people are cleared from wherever they are. let them go to the respective places, because congesting these people at one place is not going to help the lockdown in any manner. In case one of them are going to get infected, it is going to spread like wildfire. So I think through your channel, I would like to appeal to the government of India that they should immediately arrange a transport system so that these people are at least taken to the respective places. Otherwise, we are going to fail in our efforts in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in. Mr. Subramanian, they're saying we should provide them transport and get them home. But there are many, Professor Srivastava, who also say that there is a big concern about what if some of them are infected and now they're going to take it to the interiors of the country, to places where the infection hasn't reached yet.
Well, we have to do what we've been doing in the past. Thermal screening is a simple process. Explaining what they have to do once they get to their destination areas, the care that they have to take. The best care for them will be in their home environments when they are living with their families, not when they are in destination in overcrowded shelters. Let me also quickly say two things. This issue of financial inclusion. When you look at migrant population, and that is why I would disagree with my old friend Yashwardhan Azad. These are, if you look at already there are large number of organizations working on the ground, including in the state that he mentioned, Jharkhand, with migrant populations, and I think the expertise has to be brought on board. Secondly, the issue of financial inclusions. Yes, several of them have accounts, yet a large number of vulnerable migrant workers still do not have financial accounts, cannot access bank accounts. Please keep that in mind whenever a package. And finally, let me tell you that the package which was announced by the finance minister yesterday actually left one of the big gaping holes in that was precisely this population, the urban informal workers, a large chunk of whom are migrant workers. And that the distress, that is unfortunate. Yes, the states have to step in, but the center has to provide the coordinating role through the NDMA, through its guidelines, and make sure that there is interstate coordination. People who are moving should move to their homes quickly enough. People who are staying should be in safe shelters, and the destination states, the source states, where they go back, should screen them, give them guidance, and make them comfortable in their home environments.
Right. Okay. Perhaps that's one way of looking at it. Mr. Yogendra Yadav, I want to flag off another big problem that we have, hopefully the one that should get resolved in the next couple of days. But yesterday we highlighted on the transport issue, the fact that there are still about 50 to 60 lakh trucks stranded on the roads, where drivers have been forced to abandon them. The authorities at various district borders and interstate borders are not allowing vehicle movement. How are they going to allow these guys to move anywhere? Isn't that going to be another big challenge?
One more challenge for us to face, Tanvi, and if these trucks are stranded, the problem is not merely for the truck persons. The real problem is that our economy, the supply chains get stranded. The problem is then inflation begins of essential commodities, which is the last thing you want in a crisis like this. Tanvi, I've been listening to the conversation, and I think it's important to recognize that we are dealing with at least 4 different groups, and these 4 problems need to be addressed simultaneously. One, there are those urban working class people who stay in the cities, that's their permanent home, and they are unemployed. They need ration, they need some direct income support. That has been addressed only partly yesterday. On the other end, there are those who are poor people staying in villages who are not migrants, but who have lost their employment opportunities. Their concerns have been partly addressed by ration, partly by Jan Dhan, but a very large number of them have also been left out. That leaves the other 2 groups, which today we are focusing on. Those who are migrants, are in urban areas, and would ideally want to go back. A, because they have no money, they have no income. And B, we also forget this is the season when working class people normally want to go back to their villages, because this is the harvesting season.
Yes.
They normally want to go back. And then there is the 4th group, those who have already left and are on the roads. I want us to remember that those who are already on the roads are still a tiny trickle. Professor Ravi Srivastava would bear me out, because if those who want to go the migrant labor, if they were to come out on road, if 1/4 of them were to come out on road, then your lockdown would have collapsed. And that is my real fear.
Yes.
What we are witnessing right now is nothing more than a tiny trickle. And if we do not handle it today, tonight, then within the next 48 hours, our nationwide lockdown would be a joke.
Yes.
People they are voting with their feet. That's what's happening. So yes, we need to bring in NDMA. And of course, NDMA is nothing except the Cabinet Secretariat. This is two different names for the same thing. The Prime Minister is the chairman, Home Secretary is the secretary. So yes, we need to bring them in.
Yes.
They must take responsibility, must not shirk it and over to states. Yes, army may need to be brought in, not so much for food, but for transportation, for taking people from one place to the other. And the other serious problem, Tanvi, really we have, and this is a problem for which I have no solution, because if you actually start providing transport, in the city of Delhi, at least 1 million people will demand transport tomorrow morning. How would you handle that? These are things which you cannot fix post facto. These have to be thought before you take such a decision like this. And people like me had thought that the Prime Minister's office would have thought some of these things through before they made this announcement.
No, Mr.
So honestly,
Yogendra
I don't know. I'm asking for transport. But if the transport is to be provided, I mean, Professor Ravi Srivastava would probably be able to give you better figures. 1 million people will demand it tomorrow morning in Delhi.
Yes, they will.
Similarly for big cities.
Yes, and not just Delhi. This will happen in many other cities. And we've not realized, but in the past few years, people have moved from one state and home state to others in the in the hunt for jobs on a large scale, and they're all going to be looking back now to going hoping to get home the minute you start giving them this option. I want to pick up on what Mr. Yogendra Yadav was saying before that, and I will thank my panelists for joining us right now because we're completely out of time for the conversation. But here is what the governments need to realize now and move overnight, work through the weekend on this issue. Imagine thousands of people on the streets walking. Some of them have cycles, others are just walking. There is no public transport available. There are no buses, there are no empty trucks. And these people don't have food, they don't have money. They are tired and frustrated and hungry and thirsty, abandoned by their state in a time of a pandemic. If they begin to lose patience, we will have a whole different problem in this country in a couple of days from now. So no, advisories won't do. We need to treat this as a national disaster and on war footing, move to find solutions to the thousands of migrants who are leaving cities in our country tonight in a bid to get home hundreds of kilometers away from that city. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.